Hi everyone, this is Greg Hunt. I'm a mediator, a trainer, and host of No Disputing That, the podcast for anyone with an interest in dispute resolution. In this series, I sit down with some of the leading names in the dispute resolution field to discuss mediation, arbitration, and other forms of alternative dispute resolution, which we also call ADR. We may even cover other issues in the law and in life in general. Expect some laughs, some honesty, and quite a few editing errors along the way. Welcome back to no, I'll start that again. God, muck up, eh? I do say in the preamble that there may be some editing errors. I might leave that in. Welcome back. Today I'm with Mr. Awesome himself, James Walker. James started and grew Resolver, resolving £4 billion worth of issues for free. He developed Rightly, which has helped 80,000 consumers so far to take control of the data. James founded Jam Donut, which is helping consumers to save over £1 million a year. And he's also a non-exec director at Dispute Resolution Ombudsman, Consumer Scotland, and Collaboration Network. And he's also on consumer panels for the OOR, CAA, and Civil Justice Council. And I might like him in a moment to explain what those roles are and what the acronyms are. James, it's great to have you on the show.
Likewise, Greg, always a pleasure and never a chore. And I do love the introduction as Mr. Awesome.
Well, you know what? It's one thing that from the first time we met, and I'm sure many people, if not everyone who knows you, will say the same thing. You say the word awesome more than anyone else in history. Now, I don't know if you still do, so that might be new news to people who know you now and not maybe from as long back as I've known you, but you definitely, it's like, you know, who have you got a meeting with today? Mr. Awesome. Oh, James Walker. So you are. And I note that your email address actually contains the word awesome as well, so maybe things haven't
That
changed.
took a lot of looking for as well, you know. I was like, I've got to find an address with awesome in.
Now, James, before we start, can you remember the first time we met in person?
So this is usually my nemesis.
Mm.
Because I normally forget when I've met people and who they are. So therefore, I'm probably going to say something, and you're going to go, "No, it wasn't then. We met 2 years before that."
Right.
But I think it was around 2009, 2010, which is also insanely long ago now.
It is,
I was talking about this idea that I'd got and whether there was something in it about helping consumers to be able to try and resolve disputes and know what to do if they couldn't solve them. Is that right? Do you agree? I mean, this is like the exam question already.
You've got some of it right. That was the meeting that we had. But actually, I can tell you to the day, it was the 16th of October, 2008.
No.
It was, yeah.
Oh my God.
And it's not that I've got amazing recall for dates, but maybe when I tell you this, you might remember. It was the day that the British Olympic team had their homecoming in London after the Beijing Olympics.
And they went down the road and we had to look out the window.
Yeah. We were in 70 Fleet Street at the IDRC and Cedars offices, and we were watching the parade out the window.
Yeah, I do remember that. Open top buses, lots of waving, lots of shouting. Yeah.
And when you have those sort of like word association things where you'll see something on the telly and it'll remind you of something or someone. Whenever the Olympics are on and there's a British athlete, I automatically think of you. Which means every 4 years.
When the Olympics is
good.
I was going to say, if there's any consolation when the Olympics is on, I haven't thought of you because I haven't really watched them. So, I feel slight guilt, but yeah, I would have done if I'd have known. Yeah, I would have done.
Great. Right, James, on to the serious stuff. You've got, that was what, 2008. My maths is terrible. That's 12, 14 years ago. And 14 years ago, you were talking about Resolver and setting up Resolver and whether or not there's anything we could do together. You clearly had some event in your life that kicked off the passion that has meant that 14 years later, you're still doing all this stuff in consumer redress with consumer bodies. What was that nugget that 14 or 15 years ago made you think, I've had enough of this and I'm actually going to start to do something about it?
It was pretty simple. And I have to probably thank British Gas for their assistance in putting me where I am today, if you look at it. I had their boiler insurance policy, and I was the cheapskate that went with, I think it was £12 a month and £50 a call out. And the only time that boilers break down is when it's snowing and you've got children under 2 in the house. So that's when my boiler broke down. Called them out. The guy looked at the boiler and went, best thing I can do is come back tomorrow with the parts and we'll fix it. Didn't turn up. I phoned up British Gas. They said the engineers closed the case. So reopen another one, pay £50 and claim the money back. So I duly did that. But when I went to claim the money back, they turned around and went, well, there were 2 separate incidents. And you're sort of going, what, the boiler broke down on a Friday and a Sunday separately? But it was, it was me as the minnow against the large organisation CRM platform. And so I decided to make a complaint. And what I realised was the pain that, as a consumer, I didn't know my rights. I didn't know who to get hold of. I didn't know what to say. And thought, actually, why isn't this better? Why hasn't somebody sort of combined together explaining what your rights are, giving you the letter template and having the escalation process? And the idea was born. And, from there, the acorn grew.
Yeah, into a very big tree, if you don't mind me saying so. Yeah. So I remember now, because now you've said that story, I remember it. And you had a slide that if, and I won't use bad language on this show, but you're welcome to. You had a slide with, it was also sort of like a British Gas logo that had been adapted. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to share what it said?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But yeah. I think imagination on this one is better than the reality. But look, I remember actually being at a conference on this and getting up and presenting about how Resolver started. And there were some people from British Gas in the audience, and they got up and left during my presentation.
Really?
I was like, wow, this is this is like 4 years later or something. And like, wow, they still are not happy about the fact that it happened.
Yeah. Well, I bet you were more unhappy, to be honest, at the time. So thanks for that,
I
James.
was at the time, because it took them 3 weeks to solve the boiler when I was, trying to solve the problem. Yeah. And it was just painful.
Yeah. And of course, these days we don't need boilers because gas is so expensive. We can't afford to turn the boiler on anyway. So, yeah. Okay. So what's
normal? I think it.
Hey?
No, you go for it. Sorry, Craig.
No, that's fine. Now you've got all of these different roles in lots of different consumer-facing, consumer advisory organisations. You've got Jam Donut, you've got Rightly. What's a typical day now for James Walker?
One which involves very little sleep, first of all. But look, it's generally a spinning plates in one respect of going, what are the key things that need to be delivered? But what I find really interesting, if not fascinating, and I don't know if this makes me so boring, is actually the crossovers and the spin-overs of what you learn from one area and can pass into another. It's very easy that we all sit there in our silos and know everything about one topic. But actually what you realize is that when you start looking at other areas, there are things that you didn't know in another sector that can be used to help improve what you're doing. And from very simple things like, conversion to, how to get a consumer to convert on a site. So the fact on the Civil Justice Council, which I had the first meeting about 3 weeks ago, there was a conversation about is technology secure, and can you use technology to be able to help deliver an electronic court service? And it's like, well, yes, you can. And no, there isn't an issue from doing that. But the problem that exists is everyone's worried about, well, what if something goes wrong? And you're sitting there after building a numerous technology platforms going, I've never experienced an issue that you're worried about. That these issues can be resolved, and there are ways to get around them.
So you're spending most of your time collaborating then, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, look, since pandemic, and I'm sure this is true for everyone, there was a period where actually all the time seemed to be back-to-back calls, a 9 till 10, a 10 to 11, an 11 till 12. And you never got this point of stopping, as opposed to pre-pandemic, where you used to travel and you could think while you're on a train or on the tube or whatever it may be, that you had downtime. Suddenly, there was no such thing as downtime during the pandemic. And I think that collaboration element was lost, with almost it being a fury of how many meetings that you had to try and get in within a day. I'd say post that era, that it is good to get out and go and see people. It is good to go and have face-to-face meetings, albeit, they seem to be coming back slowly. But yeah, look, it's all about collaboration. You don't do awesome things if you don't work with other people well.
No, that's true. That's very true. It's funny what you say about downtime as well, because for anyone probably, I don't know, under 30, or maybe, God, I'm 50 odd now, so it might even be under 40. They won't remember the days when we actually didn't have email, and you get sort of a letter from someone. They'd written that letter a week earlier. You'd get 2 or 3 days to write a response to it, and they get it another week after that. And it was, the pace of life was so different. It's unbelievable now, technology. For however fantastic it is. And look at us now using, something like this to record something called a podcast. It didn't exist in the past. The downside is that life is just so busy, and it's so difficult to always be able to justify what you're doing with your time. And I don't know if you find this, but because I've got my own business and I tend to do almost everything myself, I end up doing 4 or 5 things at the same time on my laptop even. So I'll be doing an invoice while I'm reconciling an account, while I'm replying to someone, while I'm putting a date in for a new course or whatever it is. And sometimes I think, God, just slow down, Greg. Slow down. You've forgotten what the task is that you're doing because you've started 3 others, because another email comes in or whatever it might be. And yeah, pace of life is just crazy. Also, I think as well with things like, if that first meeting where we hung out the window looking at the Olympic team coming home, it wouldn't have happened now, or it quite possibly now we've got, oh no, let's not bother going into London. It's going to be packed because there's an Olympic parade. Let's do it by Zoom instead. And then you never actually meet. You're just having Zooms with each other, or the platforms exist. And it's all of a sudden you've got that personal history, and that personal touch is taken away because you don't actually meet people. You just talk to them on Zoom.
Yeah. And look, one of the things that on the collaboration network, which has been really interesting, is that level of engagement and almost the stratification of engagement. If you're a mid to senior manager, you've loved this idea of working from home because you can get on and have more time and not be disturbed. But if you're a sort of junior mid, actually what you want to be doing is working with that senior person to learn from their experience and get their advice and guidance, which, over a Zoom or a long distance is missing. So I think different people have reacted in different ways, but also to your point about the speed of life, there is another element that plays into this, which is each different communication channel has a different speed at which people perceive they should respond to, and this goes back round to engaging with consumers or as individuals into a service, because if you send an email, probably 10 years ago, most people would have read it. I don't think most people would read an email now if you're just
Yeah.
sending something out. But if you sent it as a text, they're more likely to read it. If you send it as a WhatsApp, they're more likely to respond to it quickly.
Mm.
So, different communication channels have different ways of engaging with consumers, and those change over the time. They're not static. They evolve fundamentally as new channels come along.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. And there'll be new ones very soon, I would imagine, with the droves leaving Twitter at the moment. But that's a different conversation. Right. Away from family and work, James, what are your biggest passions?
I don't think I have any. And
Mm.
that is so dull to say. I am an obsessive worker. So when I'm not with the family, I am working. When I'm watching TV, I am working. Um, Even when I am getting drunk, which does happen occasionally,
I
I will
know, I've
generally
been
have
there
my
at the
laptop
time. Yeah, I've been there at the
yeah.
time.
I generally have the laptop in front of me and I'll be still working.
Mm.
Um, and I think, that's the problem of starting things up is that there isn't a time that you can go, oh, yeah, I'm not working now. It's
Mm.
your baby. You can't let it, you've got to look after it. You've got to grow it. So you're always
Yeah,
on
that's right.
top of it. So yeah, I don't really have. I mean, it's probably the nearest thing is new gadgets and playing with new technology. But beyond that,
Mm.
work and family. That's it for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is something which is common in people who've got their own business, as well. I mean, I have other interests, but fundamentally, it's work and family, and then fitting other
Yeah,
things around it. And actually, when it's family, it's doing things with family. So it's going out, going for meals, going to the theatre, going to football matches, whatever it might be. But actually doing it with family, um, is I think just one of the greatest things. Um,
yeah, agreed.
and keep off your phone when you're drunk. Honestly, I got into so much trouble once at CEDA, because I was always getting in trouble, but I got in trouble. I used to work late because I'd get home on time to put the kids to bed, and then I'd work at home in the evening. And I remember Eileen Carroll saying to me once, Greg, stop sending emails at midnight because everyone else is in bed. So you don't need to do it. Just wait till the next day. That's okay, but I am working at that point. Anyway, well, let's say one time, there's probably many, but one particular time I was out at some sort of reception and drunk, emailing on the train on the way home at times I shouldn't have done. And I did get a proper telling off the next day. It was literally, Greg, please never ever reply to any emails ever again when you've had a drink. You're normally quite forthright with your answers, but when you've had a drink, it's even more. So I sort of cut it off now. If I'm out now, I don't even sort of like, well, I do look, I must admit, but I don't reply to anything if I'm out now and I've had a drink. I've learned my lesson. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
the old tip is
Mm.
I reply on laptops and I try to make sure it's offline so I can look at stuff the next morning. Um,
That's good. Yeah.
my
I like doing
my
that on a
favorite
plane.
one.
On a plane, that's good. You can
Yes,
do
yeah,
loads and loads of work on a plane and none of it's sent. So you can then just either
yeah.
decide to send it all in one hit when you log on to Wi-Fi, or you can go back in and edit. Yeah.
So here's one, and then without being too much of a distraction, is I went through a period of having lager with a Red Bull top, and it sounds absolutely horrific, but it's amazing because you can wake up the next day and you have no hangover because the amount of caffeine you've got in you, removes any negative feelings. The
Oh.
problem is that you've got to drink enough that the caffeine doesn't keep you awake. And I did this on Christmas Eve one night, and we were staying in a hotel. Um, and I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and decided that I went to look at the rest of the hotel. There's nothing happening. So I came back to the room and decided the best thing I could do was write a load of emails and I'll send them on the 28th or something. Just leave it and leave them on there. So I spent 4 hours writing emails, at which point I decided that my son one of my sons should now probably wake up. and gave him enough of a nudge that he woke up and everyone else woke up, and everyone started opening presents, and one of them had a remote control car and it wouldn't work. And I went, it's all right, I'll go online and I'll go and download the instructions, forgetting the fact that I'd written about 65 emails, which I sent to everyone on Christmas Day at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I can imagine the lack of response that maybe you got. Hopefully a lack of response.
Yeah.
Okay, a few more questions for you. What do you think would be the biggest challenge facing a consumer who finds themselves in dispute today with a trader, has not been able to resolve the dispute, and then needs to find out what they need to do next? So I'm not going to name a specific industry. It's just a dispute. It's a consumer. You don't really know what you're doing, but you've hit a brick wall with the trader and you're really confused about what comes next.
I think in many respects, no different to where the market was when I started Resolver, which is sad to say, but also not surprising, which is, where do you go and what do you do next? I mean, I remember reading the Wolf Report, and it said, go to court as a last resort, use alternative dispute resolution. There are so many different places that a consumer can go to, and they will all have conflicting advice. So what you end up doing is asking somebody that you know, asking somebody that you trust the experience of, and they're likely to go, oh, well, I think you need to go and see a solicitor. Well, very rarely will I think that that's going to be the right thing to do, because it's too low value for them as a general rule, and therefore that they don't have the experience or knowledge within those areas. That's where alternative dispute resolution was created from. How to create effectively an efficient and effective method for resolution that wasn't about confrontation, but about mediation. And I still think it's very hard for the consumer to know what to do. And even if I think of some of the marketplaces where you can go and buy services from providers, and whether that be, I don't know, getting your drains clean, to buying a product from a supplier somewhere else around the world, it's pretty poor often the way that problems are then dealt with. Often, these are scenarios where the marketplaces will go, well, actually, all we did was do the introduction. If there's a problem, it's between the two of you. No, because you took the payment. So I think there's these really hard scenarios to deal with. And the other part is that, the market moves so slowly in working out how to introduce and deal with problem areas. What was it, 2014, 2015, there was talk of mandatory ADR within home improvement, within vehicles. We're still not there. It's still on the talked about list. That the way that I think this needs to change is finding ways to do this whereby the resolution process becomes integrated into something else, where other methods of payment that have a margin cover off these services. One of the things I'm looking at is, what about if you combined faster payments with a dispute resolution service? So therefore, actually, if anything goes wrong on either sides, the margin that's made from making the transaction payment is providing the cover and the resolution to if there's an issue. So that, you create a mechanism of protection that the consumer doesn't need to know about, because that's the reason they've taken that service, or that's the reason the trader's taken that service. And you take away the friction by being more inventive on where where resolution is engaged, rather than it being a process at the end. How do you make it a process that's the part of the whole journey? How do you make it that it was at the beginning of the journey? That you don't need to worry any longer, because it's already there, and it's already there in a payment mechanism that was already being made, and there was margin on it to be able to cover it. It's that, to me, is the leap that needs to be made next. Is dispute resolution doesn't need to be this thing at the end that people have to remember about or go and find. It needs to be something that's right there, front and center. And it's about the trust and the experience journey, not about needing the resolution journey, because actually the resolution was already engaged if it was needed.
Yeah, no, spot on there. I fully agree, and I've had loads of conversations over the years with organisations about this. You know, from anything from, well, just add a penny to your product, and you sell so many products that actually that's paying for ADR. If there's a dispute, right up to speaking to insurers about policies for businesses to, legal cost cover, for example, to include an element, a premium for ADR protection. So it'll cover the costs if there's a mediation or an arbitration or something like that. The thing I've always found has stopped people doing it is they still don't understand. And there can be a whole sort of discussion on this. We haven't got time now, but there's still a massive education gap about what ADR is, and how it benefits, and some of the issues we've been talking about, and go back. We could be in 2008 and having exactly the same conversation.
Yeah.
And why is that? Why has nothing happened? And that will be something for a different conversation. But I think it's an open question. Maybe if any listeners have got a view on that, they can leave a voice message or send an email, and we can include it next time. But why have things not changed? And I was in listening to a webinar last week. I won't say which organization it was. It was about mediation. And I was absolutely astonished by the fact that the slides that were being used could have been slides I was using in 1998. Nothing seems to have changed in the way people are told about ADR, in the way the messages got over, in the way it's communicated to people. And it just made me feel, because I sort of personally have not been getting involved in things like that for a few years, and now I am again. And it just left me thinking, God, nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing. So I don't know what the answer
Greg,
is.
I think I've said. So I'm doing such a good job of interrupting. I apologise, but look, I was going to say, and I'm sure I've said this to you before. Two things. One is that I really hate the word alternate.
Yeah.
In dispute resolution, it sounds like it's the lower quality one. Do you want to take the premier resolution, or do you want the alternate one? Well, alternative does not sound a positive thing. It's bad PR by its damn name. For one. The second is, I always believe that, look, the consumer doesn't need to know what it is. What they need to know is what it does. And you build it as something that is a bonus, a reason for buying something. One of the things I did, like about the same time as we were speaking, bizarrely, when I first met, was I ran a project for B&Q in the London Borough of Sutton to see about selling energy efficiency measures into the homes. Basically, it was the foundation for the Green Deal. It was called Pay As You Save, or as I renamed it at the time, Pay As You Suffer. When the main contractor went bust, leaving loads of homes partly completed. But the big part of all of this was, when you went to go and sell to people these measures, there was always two conversations, or always two reasons why they'd make a purchase. So it'd be like, it saves us money and it makes the house warmer. That dispute resolution, to me, is part of that and conversation. It's not the main reason that somebody buys, but make it into the secondary reason that somebody wants to buy. If I get it from here, I've got no protection. If I get it from there, or use this card, or I use this service, there is an and, which is actually, if anything goes wrong, I know that I'm going to be helped to sort it out. And then that trust brings in, drives greater revenue. And then it's not about being alternative, it's about being mainstream.
Yeah. I completely agree. I'm sensing that we've not worked with each other for too long, James. We need to actually go and have a pint and chew some of these things over, because I think, now with our sort of what we're doing now and our experience in the market, maybe we can give all this a push.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Fun question, and I might answer this too. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you at a conference?
Can I change the question slightly? Am I allowed to be curveball? And B, what's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you at a conference / radio interview? Because I have a name to mention, and maybe I shouldn't mention the name, but anyway, I should keep it out. But the person will know exactly who it is. I said at the beginning of this that sometimes I'm pretty good at forgetting that I've met people. And Caroline Wayman, who used to run the Financial Ombudsman, used to say to me, "You say to people, 'Good to see you,' not 'Good to meet you,' because then if you've already met them, they don't go, 'Well, don't you remember me?'" So anyway, I rocked up at the BBC to go and do Moneybox Live, and it was 3 Jameses: James Daly from Fairer Finance, James Walker from Resolver, and Martin James from the Financial Ombudsman at the time, and a 4th person. And walked up to everyone in reception to say, "Hey, how you doing?" And introduced myself to the 4th person, a lady, who went, "James, we've already met before." And I was like, "Oh, I can't believe I've just done that." Anyway, we do the radio show, blah, blah, blah. About 6 months later, I bump into her again, and she goes, "James, do you remember who I am?" And I went, "Yes, absolutely." Gave her entire employment history because I'd memorized it. But for the love of brain cells, I could not remember her name still. So she looked at me and went, "You don't even know my name." 3rd time I met her, I knew she was going to be there. Not only had this time I'd memorized her background, I'd also printed out a picture and her name and had everything in my pocket to be able to say, when she said, "Do you know who I am?" I was like, "Yes, I've got all the information here for you." So yeah, my most embarrassing is not a conference. Actually, I think it involved a conference, because I think the 2nd and 3rd time had conferences in them. But the ability to not look like a muppet because you haven't remembered somebody that you've already met.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I slightly turned that round. And see, I'm going to do what you did now. I'm going to slightly turn that around. I have this thing, and I don't know why. It must be a confidence thing, even though I don't feel it. But I always think that people won't remember who I am. So I could be at an event and see someone that I know. It wouldn't be you, but say it was like an arbitrator from 15 years ago. And I'll think, right, I know who that is, but they might not remember me, and I'm too nervous to go over and sort of make a show of myself by saying, "Oh, good to see you again," or whatever. And they say, "Who are you?" And so it's weird. I have this real thing. So sometimes people have said, "Oh, I thought you were ignoring me." And I'm like, "No, I didn't think you'd know who I was." And then they generally say, "Of course, I know who you are," just blah blah blah. But I don't know. I find that really awkward, and sometimes it's stopped me going to things because I've thought I don't want that awkward period where I'm assuming they know who I am, but they don't. And I even do it after I've spoken. So I might be speaking at a conference and I know they've been sitting there listening to me. And I'm still thinking, oh, I wonder if they know who I am. It's all a bit stupid. My most embarrassing, I've got quite a few of these, which is why I'm sort of bringing it in now into, I'm going to ask this sort of every few podcasts. My most embarrassing one was, I can't remember if I was at the CIR or CEDA, but I was at a conference in Lisbon, and the conference launch was, I think it was an IBA conference or something like that, and the conference launch was in a monastery in Lisbon, and it was a gorgeous venue, and it was all the chairs were on stones, like loose stones.
Yeah.
And I was about, I don't know, I'm probably at my heaviest now, but I wasn't far off it then. I was probably about 16 stone. And I was sitting near the front of, 500 or 600 people watching in this opening address, keynote speech of the conference. and I sat in the chair, and very slowly but surely the chair started to sink into the stones. I'm like, because I was too heavy for it, for the stones. So I'm sitting there, and I can feel, it felt like everyone was getting taller than me and the world was moving and I was going down. And it took me a while to realize what it was. And it was actually, I was sinking into the stones. And you know, when you think, like, there's 600 people looking at me and laughing at me now, and probably no one even noticed, but it just felt so embarrassing. I just wanted to hide. And about 4 or 5 times, I had to sort of like shuffle up on the chair because it was getting too far down. If it had not moved at all, the chair would have been on the base of the stones. Like, I would have been sitting on the ground basically. And yeah, that will always live with me as my most embarrassing conference moment. Although I have got quite a few others that came close to that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It was awful. It makes me shiver now. Right, one more question. Is there anything you wish I'd asked you that I haven't?
Golly, that's a wide question.
Hmm.
What I'm doing next week, because we're going to the pub.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the one thing that always bugs me is just going back to that element. I think we've covered it off on alternative dispute resolution. It, to me, should be mainstream, is mainstream, and it talks itself down. It's almost like it wants to be apologetic for what it is. But look, I think I've managed to weave that into answers. I think the really key bit is actually trying to help influence what's happening out there. So you asked about the acronyms at the beginning.
Yeah.
The Civil Aviation Authority and the Office of Road and Rail is helping to bring, and there are others on there as well, so it's not just I, but to bring the insights of resolution and protection into looking after consumers. And that is really key to me because, you know, the way that processes change, they're not overnight. They need to be influenced and they need to be evolved by experience. And it's that the more experience that can be put towards solving these problems, the better the solutions are going to end up being.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, thank you, James. Can you give any listeners an easy way to contact you? So email address, website, how did they get in touch?
So it's pretty easy. You've already alluded to half of it. james@awesome.ninja is my email address.
Okay. Awesome Ninja. Yeah. I like it.
I got bored one night trying to find an awesome email address, and when everything's taken, but then realizing that there was a cornucopia of new emails coming out. And I was going awesome.club. I don't know. Can an individual be a club? Bit weird. I managed to find Ninja in the end. I went, that's it. There's no doubt that is an email address that I'm going to have.
Well, I like it. Thank you, James, for being my guest today. I look forward to having a real life pint with you soon. I think we've got a lot to discuss coming from this. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and I'll see you next time on There's No Disputing That. Thank you for listening to No Disputing That. Please subscribe to hear more from experts in the field. If you'd like to suggest any future areas for discussion or to appear on the show yourself, you can follow us on Twitter at No Disputing That and send us a DM. Finally, if you need a mediator, give my management team at Arbitra International a call on 020 7936 7070 or email info@arbitra.co.uk. See you next time on No Disputing That.